Right now, Turkey is at a boiling point. We're talking millions of people on the streets, an economy that's just in a complete freefall, and a political showdown that could change everything. So in this explainer, we're going to break down what's really going on. We'll look at the economic pain, the political spark that lit the fuse, and the government's really tough response. All right, let's dive in.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll get a sense of the turmoil on the ground. Then, we'll dig into the economic collapse that's really the root of all this public anger. After that, we'll look at the specific political event that just ignited the whole thing. We'll also cover how President Erdoğan is responding, and finally, we'll touch on something pretty strange, the silence from the rest of the world.
Okay, so let's start with what's happening right now, on the streets. The situation in Turkey is, to put it mildly, intense. The country is in the middle of this huge wave of civil unrest, and it's getting volatile, capturing headlines and, raising alarms all over the globe. Yeah, one source put it in a really powerful way. They said, the country is effectively on fire. And honestly, that doesn't feel like an exaggeration. It really gets at the intensity of what's happening, with just massive numbers of citizens out on the streets.
People on the ground are describing what they're seeing as just insane scenes. The capital, Ankara, seems to be the epicenter of all this. We're talking about demonstrations that have swelled to include millions of people, all just pouring out to voice their frustration.
Now here's where things get really interesting. It's the language that's being used. People aren't just calling these protests anymore. Some international observers, some critics, they're starting to use the term full-blown dictatorship. That's a huge shift, and it tells you a lot about how President Erdoğan's government is now being seen by the rest of the world. So the big question is, why are millions of people protesting? To get that, we have to look at the engine behind all this anger, the total meltdown of the Turkish economy. And this isn't just a regular downturn, it's a full-blown crisis, and it's all rooted in a pretty controversial economic idea.
Just look at these numbers. They really show you the scale of the collapse. The Turkish lira has been completely decimated. Why? Well, it's largely because of this really unorthodox policy of cutting interest rates while inflation is soaring, which is the exact opposite of what basically every economist would tell you to do. Now, to put this into perspective, especially for our viewers in India, think about this. 5 years ago, one Turkish lira was worth about 11 or 12 Indian rupees. Today, you need 2 lira just to equal a single rupee. That's not just bad, that is a staggering collapse.
And, well, when a currency crashes that hard, you know what happens next. Sky-high inflation. The price of everything, we're talking food, fuel, you name it, it just explodes. And this isn't some abstract economic concept. This is a catastrophic blow to the financial security of literally every single person in the country. And this is where the numbers become a truly human story. Imagine this, the life savings of elderly people. Stuff they worked for their entire lives, gone, just vanished. Middle-class families who thought they were secure, they've lost everything. So many are now completely dependent on government welfare, which, by the way, isn't even close to being enough. This deep, widespread economic pain, that's what's driving people into the streets.
Okay, so you've got all this economic anger just simmering below the surface, right? But it needed a spark. It took one specific political event to turn all that anger into the massive political crisis we're seeing today.
And right at the center of this whole thing, you've got two main players. On one side, there's President Erdoğan, the man who's been in power for years. And on the other, you have the very popular mayor of Istanbul. He's really become the face of the opposition and a major political rival.
And this is when things just exploded. The government took a really drastic step. They jailed the mayor of Istanbul. Now, because he's so popular and seen as Erdoğan's biggest opponent, this wasn't just treated as a simple arrest. It was seen by many as a direct attack on the entire opposition movement.
So what were the official charges? Well, they threw the book at him. Everything from corruption to supporting terrorism. But, and this is a big but, pretty much everyone, both inside and outside of Turkey, sees this as a political move. The timing is just too convenient. It looks like a strategic play to take a powerful rival off the board before the 2028 elections.
So, you have millions protesting, and your main rival is in jail. How does President Erdoğan's government respond to all this? Well, let's just say it hasn't been with compromise.
Listen to the words President Erdoğan himself is using to describe these protests. He's calling it street terror. Think about that. He's labeling a movement of millions of his own citizens terror. By doing that, he's not framing this as legitimate public anger, he's framing it as a hostile threat to the country itself.
And his actions are absolutely matching his words.
We're seeing zero signs of compromise, no concessions at all. In fact, it's the opposite. The government is digging in its heels, doubling down, and just refusing to give in to any of the protesters' demands, all while keeping an iron grip on power.
This uncompromising stance has everyone wondering, what's next? Analysts are suggesting the government could escalate things in a big way. We're talking about possibilities like implementing martial law or declaring other emergency measures. Basically, anything to solidify their control and crush this unrest.
All right, now let's zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture. Turkey is a major NATO ally, and it's in turmoil. So you'd expect a pretty strong reaction from the international community, right? Well, what we're actually seeing is something else entirely.
What is so striking here is the silence, the complete silence from Western powers. You have these massive protests, a major political opponent getting jailed, serious concerns about human rights, and yet, from the United States and the European Union, publicly, nothing.
And of course, this silence has real consequences. Without any external pressure, President Erdoğan's position isn't really being challenged from the outside. This creates a kind of geopolitical vacuum, which basically means this huge internal power struggle is being left to play out completely on its own.
And all of this brings us to the one crucial question at the very heart of this crisis. You've got an economy in ruins, a society in protest, a government that's digging at its heels, and the rest of the world is just watching silently. So what does this all mean for the future of democracy in Turkey? That is the big question, and for now, nobody has the answer.